beer, wine, or liquor, King Discount Liquors has you fitted.
From a party of 2 to 200, Johnny Bev is the man to see for any of your party needs. Cash your winning $5,000 ticket and receive 30 free tickets just for cashing in.
Imports, craft beers, domestics, it's all here for you. You got to come to Rosedale and see the King.
8226 Pulaski Highway in Rosedale. Find us on Facebook or go to kingliquors.com.
He doesn't even have Facebook.
Enjoy your pleased wings, guys.
Thanks. And we didn't always watch football here at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Hi, guys.
Hey!
Ready for the big game? We can't wait.
Hey, have you guys ever watched football on a vintage TV?
Huh?
19 inches, black and white. You can feel the raw emotion. Textbook German expressionism.
Oh, awesome.
Protect the football. Watch every game here. Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports.
The WNST.net text service, where all the other local sports media outlets get their information. WNST.net.
Yeah, attention, Thyrl Nelson. Attention, Thyrl Nelson. We'll be doing the handoff now. You're gonna come join me? I almost thought I was flying solo there for a little while. I thought I'd be handing it off to myself. I thought that was the way that it was going to be going. It is the handoff. It's brought to you by Towson Place Liquors in the Towson Place Shopping Center, just across from Walmart. 10% today, 10% discount for all WNST listeners, and all purchases of $20 or more. Stop in and see them in the Towson Place Shopping Center, just across from Walmart, or go check out their new location, Angels Cut Wine and Spirits in Ellicott City, 5725 Richards Valley Road. Same great ownership, same great deals. Angels Cut Wine and Spirits and Towson Place Liquors. Do you remember the scene in Anchorman where he says, it's the Pancake Social. We do it every month.
Yeah.
That's what I feel like saying. It's the handoff, Thyrl. We do it every day.
Yeah, you got to be ready for anything in live radio, man. So,
I mean, I am ready.
I know you are. Handing it off to yourself.
If you had just run away, I would have just said, all right, I guess it's just time for me to do radio.
There you go.
I guess that's the way it is. I usually look forward to seeing you at 2 o'clock.
This is a highlight of my day, man. I wouldn't miss it for the world.
It is. You tell me that, but it's weird how many times I look over at 2 o'clock and you literally have just walked out of the room.
Like I'm right.
Like you'll be sitting there for 2 minutes, we'll be like staring at each other in silence because we don't want to waste any of the good material.
That's what I get is stunned silence when you walk in.
And then you'll hear the rejoiner and you'll be like, I got things to do.
Yeah, it's
gotta get up, gotta go wash my hands, whatever it is. All
Fill
right.
the coffee, you know.
Good to see you. Good to see you. $120.6 million. Obviously, not really $120.6 million. As you always say, and I know you've been talking about again today. Look, it's a 3-year contract, and the Ravens are going to attempt to do exactly what the Patriots have continuously done with Tom Brady. They're going to attempt to revisit this situation every couple of years, provided Joe Flacco is the quarterback. They believe he's capable and shown himself likely to be over the course of the next 5-10 years. They're going to just keep doing this thing where we'll give you a series of short contracts, and every few years we'll sit back down, we'll see where we're at, and we'll look at it again from there.
And I got to say that, again, looking at this as a guy who left 18 or so million on the table per year last year and played out the season under a $6.75 million salary, I mean, he cut the Ravens some breaks. Again, if he was willing to gamble on his ability to stay effective and healthy for 2 years, he could have had $84 million in hand over the course of those 2 years plus. And so, to walk away with what I'm guessing is 36 to 39 in terms of franchise or in terms of signing bonus money, he did right by the Ravens, I think.
Well, the guarantees are important. I mean, that's very important. And there's nothing to sneeze at in $52 million guarantees.
Yeah, but what type of guarantees are they? Guaranteed against injury?
Yeah, no, the guarantee against injury is 30-some. It's somewhere in that range.
Right.
This is the real guarantee money. This is he's gonna get $52 million out of this deal, sort of no matter what, as long as he plays.
Right.
You know what I mean? If he plays, he's gonna get $52 million. That's a lot of money. That's nothing to. This is the Tom Brady argument. Nobody's doing anyone any favors.
Sure.
In this process, there's no favors that are being done. The players aren't doing the teams any favors. The teams aren't doing the players any favors. No one is trying to help out someone or say, for being a good guy, or gosh, we just really feel like doing this for you. It's just unless you're in a bad organization. If you're in a bad organization, then you might have levels of stupidity that allow for these things to play out. This is essentially the deal that he was always going to get.
Yeah. Well, and the important thing now is with only $7 million, having sort of, again, maybe prophesized the doomsday scenario, set their expectations that they might have to embrace, big changes to the salary cap if he was going to command 14 or 20 million, depending on what it was. Suddenly Ozzy's got to feel great about the way that his cap looks going into 2013.
Getting this done, and this is why you press. And at some point, the immediate numbers make it look like Joe Flacco won a little bit. It makes it appear as though by getting $20 million on average per year in the make-believe money, it looks like Joe Flacco won. He wanted to be in that range, and he got it. By getting the richest contract in NFL history, Joe Flacco won. But that's what the Ravens had to do. They had to do that, because otherwise they would just have to sink X amount of their salary cap into one guy and sit back and watch all of their players go elsewhere. It's not like Joe Flacco held the team hostage, because he didn't. He just wanted a contract.
Well, and this is the quarterback market, which the interesting thing for me is, so many have said that, well, it's based on a 4-game stretch. It's really not. It's based on the leverage that he has due to a scarcity
of his position. It's based on the fact that he plays quarterback.
Right.
Correct.
Scarcity. So if Matt Ryan wants to go down this line, then he can get 20.2. He could probably get 20.5. If Aaron Rodgers wants to go down this line, he could probably get $25 million or more per season. I think that Flacco has sort of changed the market. And I think that part of this is attributable to the Redskins and Robert Griffin III because of what we know is the willingness of teams to give up draft picks.
Yeah, in part I think it has everything to do with that, but I also think it's just in part you establish whether or not you have one of these guys. That's what Mark Sanchez got a boatload of money, not this much money, but he got a boatload of money.
Tony Romo can get this if he exercises his leverage the right way.
If you establish that this is your guy, this is the cost of having him.
Right.
I mean, that's just the way it is. Yeah. There's no debating that. There's no way around it. There's no, we'd rather pay him this amount. If you establish that a certain player is your quarterback, then this is the world in which you're living. Yeah. And if he's accomplished something, it's going to be a little bit more than the guys that haven't really accomplished anything. But you're absolutely right about Tony Romo. Tony Romo will turn around and say, yeah, you're right, I haven't won a Super Bowl, but look at all these numbers.
Right. Somebody will pay me.
And look at those Pro Bowls. And, yeah, if you think I hit the open market, there isn't a team that's willing to give up a lot to get me, you're damn right there is. This is what it costs to have a quarterback.
Right. And, oh, by the way, you want to play hardball with me, it costs you at least $15 million on your salary cap next year.
Correct.
Guaranteed.
So this isn't really about, is it worth it to pay Joe Flacco this amount of money? It's about, do you want to have Joe Flacco or not?
Right.
That's what you're really debating. Do you want to have Joe Flacco or not? Okay, you do, then this is what it's going to cost you. And you can play it out to the last day, and essentially that's what the Ravens did. They played it out to the last day to try to win as much as they could, but they knew the answer. They couldn't go to Tuesday without having Joe Flacco under contract. Yeah. It wasn't going to work. They had to get it done. So ultimately they said, all right, let's do this in the way that most benefits us. And they're not kidding themselves. No one walked into that room and said, well, we're going to make that amount that you've got on the books for year 4. Everybody knows the deal. Either the Ravens, if Joe Flacco falls on his face in the next 3 years, which no one is expecting, but the Ravens will release him at that point, and they'll try all over again, or they'll renegotiate his deal.
Move it around. That's it.
I mean, it's just that now Joe Flacco would always have the right, if he really wanted to try to hold the Ravens hostage then.
Yeah. Well, and even then, you go Tom Brady's route and you say, well, look, it's not that we're not going to pay you this money, but instead of a salary, we're going to call it a signing bonus.
Correct.
And we're going to prorate that number over 4 more years, let's say, or add 2 to your deal and prorate it over the last 5 years, 4 years of your new contract, essentially.
Correct. They're going to make it so that it's better off for Joe Flacco, that ultimately he's better off with whatever they want to do than he is with what he already has. That's just the way that it is. And
we'll call him benevolent then.
Right, correct. We'll say, what a good guy this Joe Flacco is.
Give him back money.
When we could say the thing, as you already attempted to, we could say that right now about Joe Flacco. What a good guy you are for not holding the Ravens hostage for $25 million or taking up part of the cap, for making sure that you got things done before the deadline, because you could have.
Sure.
You could have just taken that $21 million or that $14 million, whatever it was going to be. You could have done that and just said, that's what you're paying me this year, or obla-dee, obla-da. Life goes on.
Right. Next year's 24.
Right. You didn't do that. So God bless you for it.
Obla-dee, obla-da, huh?
Desmond has a bear on the marketplace. Molly is a singer in the band. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Of course.
And as he says it, Molly takes him by the hand. Obla-dee, obla-da, life goes on.
There you go.
It's the Beatles.
I was just I was asking you to clarify for those that might not be as hip as
No, hang on a second. You mean to tell me there's people that aren't as hip as you?
Yeah, perhaps. Maybe a couple.
All right. This obviously the next question becomes, what do the Ravens do now? And I think I painted this picture a great deal. I'm surprised by how much people are only talking about this in the last 24, 48 hours. And I don't know if you were with me. I think we were on. This was Joe Flacco identified. The next of their free agents that the Ravens were always going to work on would have been Donnell Ellerbe.
Right.
He was always going to be number 2 of the group. That said, it's a really interesting juxtaposition for me because of their own guys, it was very clear Donnell Ellerbe was number 2, and I think that's been made more apparent. Not that I need it made more apparent. I tried telling you guys that was the way that it was going to work, and that the Ravens had, in their own minds, already parted ways with Paul Kruger and Kerry Williams. They had already accepted those guys were gone, and the more you sort of see it, the more you understand from other... Sure. I guess 12 other people wanted to report the same thing that I already told you for the last 4 weeks.
No, I think that this flexibility does give you reason to think twice about Kruger.
Yeah,
not for a long-term deal, but to bring it back for 1 year and see if that's really him.
It would be a neat thought, but the franchise tag is far too much. You just cannot borrow yourself with a 1-year deal like that for the franchise tag. There's no way you can do it, and there's no thought process that if you allow him to hit the open market, that you're going to be willing to match what another team would be willing to give him.
For sure not that.
But Paul Kruger, the real problem with a guy like Paul Kruger is this is the real truth to the Browns Flacco argument. The argument from other people about why you were going to have to use the exclusive tag on Flacco is because you had a team like the Browns that had money to spend and they could just sink it all in Joe Flacco. That was never going to happen. The team was never going to offer such a front-loaded contract that the only thing they could do would be get one player. They just weren't going to do that. The teams don't tie their hands that way.
Sure.
But when they can spend the same amount of money to get a few players, then they're willing to overpay guys. And the Browns are a perfect example of the type of team that's got a little bit more money and would gladly give it to a guy like Paul Kruger because they have to give it to someone, and it does weaken your opponent, and it does make you better all at the same time.
And Kruger's almost at a point where even if you entertain the notion of franchising, again, I don't want to say that it would be a bad thing for him to come back and have a great year. But, it gives you a 1-year audition to find out if he really is the player that he looked to be this year. But even in the event that he was, you certainly couldn't afford to do it a second time.
Right.
You couldn't afford to pay him after that. So it would be a 1-year rental. They're going to let this guy get his money. They're going to cash in a compensatory pick as a result.
Again, I keep going back to, it would really hurt them. The amount for these guys that go after quarterbacks get paid a boatload of money. And Paul Kruger's agent would make sure that it'd be regardless of position. The Ravens would try to fight it based on position, but Paul Kruger's agent would make sure that he pulled out the 5 pass rushers regardless of position and say, that's the amount you're going to have to pay us if you franchise us this year.
You'd be in court like you were with Thyrl Suggs.
And you're just going to be buried. You're going to be buried by that. And the other things you want to get done, you can't. So there's not even, despite the fact the Ravens already said they weren't going to do it, there isn't even an argument for it. There isn't even an argument because Paul Kruger, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, even if you could get it for just 1 year, isn't worth it.
Linebacker 9.455.
What is it, a defensive end?
That's what I'm looking for now. 10.984.
Okay, so they're going to make
$11 million bucks.
They're going to make the argument that you've got to pay us at that level. And it's just that's the level you've got to pay us, and you're not going to sink $10 million into Paul Kruger. It's just because if you were, you'd be willing to give him a long-term deal.
They're all really big numbers all of a sudden. It used to be like tight end was low, safety was low.
Because all it takes is 5.
Yeah.
It only takes 5 players to be living at a certain threshold in order for you to have to pay an absurd amount of money to them. It's not the overall average. It's the average of the best.
Yeah. So $11 million 1 year, and every nickel of it counts against the cap.
Correct.
Too.
You could never, ever do that. And no offense to Paul Kruger, but you cannot even – you can make the argument that Joe Flacco would legitimately have been worth $20 million this year. You cannot. You giggle at the assumption.
Right.
And I'm not trying to say that Paul Kruger couldn't go somewhere else and have a very good year.
His contract is going to look like that. He's going to get 3 years, 44.
The point is, if you were ever going to franchise him, you would just give him a contract because it would suit you better.
Yeah, I was looking at it more of you compromise what would be seen as a long-term gamble. You know what I mean? You get one more year out of him.
Yeah, but it's just you can't.
And again, you're almost scared that he backs it up with another great season because then you have a really difficult decision to make.
You absolutely cannot
this
give
one's
that
on the
type
Ravens.
of money.
The Ravens messed this one up from the get.
With Kruger?
Yeah. As far as not figuring out what they wanted from him. You know, you heard Ozzie say once upon a time, I believe it was Casey Robach, like, by the time we figured out that this guy was a football player, we lost him.
Right.
And you could sort of say the same with the wishy-washy approach that they took to Paul Kruger throughout his career. You finally find out that he's a football player.
Do you really think an organization that let Jarrett Johnson go is going to lose any sleep over letting Paul Kruger go?
He's younger. I mean, I don't know. If Paul Kruger becomes J.J. Watt, which I'm not losing sleep expecting it, but that's how he hits the market. I'm not going
to tell you Paul Kruger couldn't go on to be a good pass rusher for a few years, but I am not making any assumption that
if they could assign Suggs numbers to Kruger going forward, I think that if they had some confidence in him, long term, that he's a better bet than Suggs right now, who's a lot longer in the tooth.
Yeah,
but again, you have Suggs on the books. You have Nada on the books. I mean, that's the other funny part of this whole, reaction to me is nobody's asking those guys to give back any money based on, despite the fact that
they can't either.
Right, no doubt.
They can't because they might never get another contract. You do this with quarterbacks because you're essentially saying we're going to keep giving you money. The Ravens can't give more money to Haloti Ngata.
Right.
They can't go to Haloti Ngata right now and say we're going to give you we're going to extend this money and we're going to give you $5 million extra. They can't do that because they don't know if Haloti Ngata is worth giving extra money to right now. They couldn't do that with Thyrl Suggs. They can't. They just got to try to get through these contracts and figure out if they're worth giving another one to or not. That's the only thing they can do with those two players. You can do it with your quarterback the way that the Patriots did because you assume that guy's going to be good for another few years and you're not going to regret giving him ultimately $5 million more. Somebody's still got to sign it, even if it doesn't come off the salary cap. Somebody's still got to sign a check for $5 million more, and that's not – we like to pretend that we live in a world or they live in a world where that's sort of chump change. It's not. Robert Kraft signs off on that because he says to himself, I think this guy's going to be worth me doing this. Steve Bisciotti could never do that with a Thyrl Suggs or a Haloti Ngata because he has no idea if those guys would be worth putting $5 million more into the investment you've already put into them. You couldn't possibly even consider it with guys like that. So Paul Kruger, Kerry Williams, they've always been gone. That's not changing. Certainly you'll hear Indianapolis linked with both of those guys. And
the Ravens threw the Hail Mary at Kerry Williams to begin this season.
All right, they tried to get him. They tried to get him, and everybody made fun of him at the time. They were trying to get him for a bargain.
Yeah.
You don't get starting cornerbacks or cornerbacks of any quality for that amount of money.
For sure.
Unless you're trying to find another team's Corey Graham. If you think you can do that, and the Ravens at this point are going to say, look, we don't. Part of the reason, if they didn't have cornerbacks, they might be willing to pay Kerry Williams. Part of the problem is we got a numbers issue to begin with at cornerback. We're coming back a year from now with a guy that's established himself as a player in Corey Graham.
Too many corners.
It's not. It's definitely not.
Right, but that's where the too many corners to be paying.
But essentially, that's the issue. Yeah. Essentially, the issue is we got Corey Graham, we got to pay Ladarius Webb, we still have Jimmy Smith under a fairly favorable rookie contract. We got to go with those guys. Yeah. We just have to go with the guys that we have and, add in a Shockey Brown, add in an Asa Jackson, maybe find one more Kerry Williams, one more Corey Graham, one more diamond in the rough somewhere else that we can throw into the mix. And if somebody gets hurt, he steps in and plays. That's how they'll handle corner. And I like Kerry Williams. I think Kerry Williams is a nice player, but I understand it. I understand the fact that you just have to let him go.
Yeah.
You have to let Kerry Williams go. You have to let Paul Kruger go. Dannell Ellerbe becomes the guy you have to get back.
Yeah.
You have to have Dannell Ellerbe back with this money.
Is he going to play hardball with these guys? Because, again, you think that Ellerbe is back, and I don't disagree at all. 9.455 is a tag. I mean, he's not getting anywhere close to that.
They're not tagging him for sure.
I mean, is he in the $4 to $5 million range?
I definitely think he's in the $4 to $5 million range. Again, the benefit for the Ravens will be that teams do not pay middle linebackers a boatload of money, that they're genuinely looking for a bargain. So you might have to pay him Ray Lewis money like the last time you paid Ray Lewis, but again, that was seen at the time as somewhat of a bargain for getting Ray Lewis back. They'll have to pay him money. I mean, they're not getting him for free. But it looks like it will probably work out. They'll have the money. They will more than likely let him hit the market, see what he sees. But I think this serves them well for getting Dannell Ellerbe back. I think that ultimately this is going to be a good thing. I'll keep coming back to what I've come back to all along. I haven't even mentioned Ed Reed in this process. that to me is such a wild card still.
Yeah.
And I do not, and I mean this, no pun intended, I do not have a read on the number 20 situation.
Well,
I just don't have it.
When you and I discussed last week about the value of his leadership all of a sudden and made more poignant by some Thyrl Suggs comments, if you look at yourself as having a surplus of money now, that's the interesting thing for me with Ozzie is that in the back of his mind he had to prepare to pay Flacco at least $15 million this year and clear out that amount of money. And so to some degree, there's $8 million or so worth of found money, which gives you reason to maybe reinvestigate some of the doomsday scenarios he was looking into, or gives you a little bit more money than you thought you had. And which is why, I made the Kruger suggestion that it might be something that they would consider for a one-year rental. Maybe it's Ed Reed that you think about and say, well, even if it's going to cost me $4.5 million a year, maybe it is worth it because of the leadership aspect. It's got to be for a very short term.
I think the reason why I haven't been able to get any sort of read or inside track on this is because Ed still has no agent. And with no agent, there's really no sources. I'm not trying to give away a trade secret. If you see something coming from a source,
it's the agent.
7.5 times out of 10, it's the agent. That's just the way it is. 7.5 times out of 10. Not always. A lot of times it's someone that the agent knows.
Right.
Sometimes rarely is it ever the actual player because the player legitimately doesn't really know a ton. Yeah. In the whole process.
Apparently someone called Flacco on Friday, and he was like, oh yeah, or he learned about it watching TV, I think was one of the
correct.
tweets I saw.
I just watched Joe Flacco's press conference. He absolutely learned about it while having pizza, although he said he knew. He's like, no, I had talked to Joe. I knew that it was essentially done, but I didn't know that it was suddenly going to be on TV everywhere. I didn't know that it was breaking on Friday. I had no idea, and I didn't sign anything. You put something in front of me, and when Joe's got it done, I'll go sign it. That's the way that it's going to be. That's essentially what Joe Flacco said.
Did he mention the brand of pizza, by the way? He gets paid to do that.
By who?
Joe Flacco.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's Joe Flacco-licious.
I don't know if they have that in New Jersey. That might be a Baltimore area thing only. That might be all that is. It's very tough for me right now to get a feel for what's going to happen with Ed Reed. That's still, I think, a major wild card in this whole process. And I don't know. This is the tough part. I do get the sense that Ed is kind of waiting for the phone call from the Ravens. He's sort of waiting for them to call him and say, let's talk. Yeah. And I don't know if that's coming because, again, the Ravens have to have a priority list, and there's just no way that Ed Reed can be ahead of Dannell Ellerbe on that priority list. And then it comes back to the other thing, and this is the handoff. I'm Glenn. He's Thyrl. It's brought to you by Towson Place Liquors on WNST. The other thing being the left tackle position.
Right.
To me, that's such the wild card still here. I guess I said Ed Reed was the wild card.
They're all wild cards.
They're not all wild cards to me. To me, the known commodity is Dannell Ellerbe. That's the guy you definitely want back.
Right.
You treat that similarly to Joe Flacco. The only difference being Joe Flacco was always going to be the guy. He was always going to be the quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens. Dannell Ellerbe was always going to be the guy that you wanted back at inside linebacker. You just didn't know if you're going to have the ability to do it or not. You had hoped, and you still hope, but you've identified he's the guy. Now, can we get it done? Joe Flacco, it was he's the guy. Now we've got to get it done. Dannell Ellerbe is he's the guy. Now can we get it done? Ed Reed, you don't really know if he's the guy.
Yeah.
You'd like to think so, but
well, and you could also even point to another position because a lot
left
of
tackle
is that
very much that way.
For sure. And a lot of the money that they would have had to get to pay the bigger number for Flacco, we were guessing, was coming from either releasing or renegotiating Jones and Bolden. And now in both of those situations, just like you talked about with long-term health outside of the quarterback position, now in both of those situations, you say, well, maybe we just let them play out their last year. Well, maybe we just allow them to play under the terms of this contract because we'd like to have both back, and now we don't have to extend ourselves any further in an effort to lessen that salary cap burden.
Right. That's tough because I do think there's no reason for me to think that Anquan Bolden only has 1 year left in him.
Or Jones, for that matter, right? He's a young guy.
Yeah, I don't know how good Jacoby Jones really is. And I mean that with all due respect to him. He's very fast, and he's a lot of fun to watch, and he's a neat person to talk to, and he's an entertainer.
I thought he was a bum when he got here, man. He is silenced me completely.
Definitely, I was not with you. I thought this was a good move for the Baltimore Ravens, but anything that involved signing up for more of Jacoby Jones, I was never really going to be in agreement with. And I'm not to say to take anything away from the value that he has as a returner. He's just an average receiver. That's all he is. He's an average receiver
with really good speed.
With good speed, and he's a very good return man for the most part. Maybe very good is a stretch because he still has a tendency to bobble balls.
You don't trust him inside the 20. I mean,
right.
He showed that over and over again.
Make you nervous. So you don't, hang on, in fairness to Jacoby Jones, you never put your return man back inside the 20. You always run a safe play there. Whenever a team is in, and I want to say that to clarify, whenever a team is in a favorable, could perhaps run a fake here play, you always put your safe guy in. That really doesn't have anything to do with Jacoby Jones. That's the same as it's always been in Baltimore and the same as it is in a lot of places. But in Baltimore specifically, no matter who the punt return guy was, Ed Reed or Ladarius Webb or Tom Zibik, someone safe was always in on those types of plays because you're in a spot on the field where a team is a little bit more willing to consider running a fake. And so you want to have a safety on the field.
I get what you're saying.
I'm telling you what.
As return specialists go, as Pro Bowl return guys go, you don't see Devin Hester come off in those situations.
Well, that's the Chicago thing. I'm telling you, that's not a Jacoby Jones thing. That's a Baltimore thing. It was the same way with everyone else they've ever had in that role. That is a Baltimore thing. It's a Jerry Rossberg thing, I guess is the way I can explain it, because I don't really know how Gary Zauner ran it. I don't really remember how any of those guys. I'm telling you that in the Jerry Rossberg era, that has not changed. They have always, always, always ran safe plays there. And a lot of people said, well, why are you letting Ed Reed tell you that he's coming on the field? That was never really what the case was. The case was way more, he was the safe guy. He was just in case they're running a fake here, we want to have a safety on the field instead of a receiver. We want to have someone who can defend a pass, not a receiver. That was always, always, always the story on that. So I want to make that clear, because that is very important when you consider that. All of it being said, Jacoby Jones is a good return person. He's a very nice return person. Most teams that have exceptional returners aren't very good. The Bears have been good with Devin Hester. The Browns have been woeful with Josh Cribbs. You don't look around and see superb return men being a key part of a great franchise. You can get an adequate guy. You can get a guy that's a little bit better than Lamont Brightful, a guy that's a little bit better than B.J. Sams, a guy that's a little bit better than Yamon Figures. Okay. You can do better than that, but you don't.
You mean as paydays go?
I mean, just as overall players are concerned. Look back on the last 10 years.
I mean, I get it, but we could say the same about running back.
Agreed. I mean, okay. I'm not disagreeing with you. Now the Rams have decided to pay their running back.
Right.
They might decide to pay their kick returner, punt returner. But I have no need. If he's going to really cost you money, no need. No need. Get someone. Get someone that can do it. Don't just go with the B.J. Sams.
Well, you got to have a burner. I mean, the other thing is he proved some value on this offense toward the end.
Yeah, again.
The two burners thing was, it was big for them. And
but you can get guys that are fast or available.
Right, well, you have to replace them in that way, for sure.
I mean, you can get fast receivers.
Tommy Streeter ain't going to be that guy.
I don't think so, no. Right. I don't see him being that guy. But there's always a speed receiver available somehow that you can get. They're always out there. It's way easier to find a speed receiver than it is to find a size receiver. It's way easier to do that. There are a ton of go watch the combine from last week. How many guys were lightning fast? How many receivers? How many receivers ran less than a 4.48, for example, which is crazy fast. It's crazy fast for you to be able to run less. I'll say 4.45.
Okay.
4.45 or less to me it's crazy fast. How many receivers did that? I mean, almost the majority of them, right? I mean, you can get a fast receiver. Those guys are available to be had. So I was never going to sign up for giving more to Jacoby Jones. The Anquan Bolden thing, to me, you still consider doing it because it might be better for your team. Giving Anquan Bolden a 3-year deal right now might just in all be better for your football team. It gives you the continuity. You can't fathom a reason why you don't want Anquan Bolden to be a part of your team. You don't really see him as being too old in 2 years. Maybe you're really just giving him another year if you give him a 3-year deal. That's all you're really doing. You're just giving him one more year because the third year would always be, we can hack you if we need to hack you.
So, I mean, if you're lukewarm at best on Jones now, and it seems almost silly, but does the fact that he's probably not going to be around for OTAs make you less prone to even want him back next year? It's not like he's not going to be working. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be staying in some level of physical shape, but not football shape. I mean, Donald Driver fell off precipitously. Hines Ward fell off precipitously, it would seem, almost immediately after their off-season forays. I mean, it's certainly something to consider that he's not going to be around for your off-season work.
I don't know. I mean, I've never really had this conversation before. I don't think it's a big deal, but I would prefer that a guy not do this show than that he does it. I mean, honestly, I would rather him not be doing Dancing with the Stars than him doing it, just because I don't care enough. It's not. If it was something cool, if it was like he was appearing at WrestleMania or something like that, I might
be in for that,
personally lean a little bit different. There is some value to this guy going to do the show, and if you're the type that wants to sit around and watch Dancing with the Stars, it'll be neat for you to see Jacoby Jones doing it. I don't know. I've been torn on that. I'm not giving him more money. I know that much. I'm not giving Jacoby Jones any more money because I just don't. I think he's proven himself to be what I thought he was capable of being, which is a guy whose speed can be a factor in more than one way. Let's see. Regularly, Devin Hester followed up, a crazy year with a year where you could sort of contain him. And not to say it wasn't so valuable that they had him, because it forced guys to punt to him a different way. It forced more punts out of bounds. I think teams are going to think a little bit more about Jacoby Jones next year by having him around. You'd rather have him, but I don't know that you're investing a lot in saying this guy is such a difference maker. We better make sure we do something that involves giving him more money. I think you're more willing. With Jacoby Jones, it's way more the Paul Kruger argument. We need one more year to really figure out if this was just a really good year or if he's really this type of player that could be perhaps special moving forward.
Yeah.
Let me, before I let you out of here, I wanted to just sort of bring this all back in and one kind of overall thought, and I'll open up the phones about this at 410-481-1570. In 3 years, and again, I'm assuming that this is going to be about a 3-year thing before we worry about Joe Flacco's contract again. I want you to look into your crystal ball. What are we going to be saying about this decision in 3 years? What when we sit down, when you and I are doing the handoff on March 4th of 2016, and I say to you, Thyrl, let's think back to what we were saying the day the Ravens signed this deal with Joe Flacco. What are you going to be saying about the contract at that point?
Wow, that's tough. I don't think that he's going to be disappointing by any stretch. I do think that, the title highest paid for as long as he keeps it is going to be sort of an albatross to Joe Flacco. I don't think that the perception of him is likely to change at any point going forward. And the one thing that, we sort of suggested or I was, making inference to last week was that, by way of holding the Ravens hostage if he elected to do so. If Flacco was really going to play out this season, let's say, under the franchise tag, or was going to come in with numbers that were not cap-friendly to the Ravens, then it almost sort of served him in a way that he would be able to build his reputation more. Because if the Ravens had less money to spend around him, particularly on defense, then they would have to ask him to do a lot more, and that might lead to, the numbers that so many suggest are the difference between Flacco being an elite quarterback and not. I don't think the perception of Flacco changes because I don't think the Baltimore game plan changes all that much. I think that they're going to be a team that fails to throw caution to the wind. The one thing that hasn't been said about Flacco, and I went and checked the numbers this weekend just to be sure about it, he has had 4 multiple interception games in the last 3 seasons. 56 games combined. He has thrown more than 1 interception just 4 times.
Sure.
One of those being that Bengals game with 4, right. But, to me, he's a guy who takes care of the football and doesn't necessarily get enough credit for that. We instead look to his completion percentage and say, well, that's not good enough. And I think that he's adequate. I think that he will consistently be a top 5 to 7 quarterback. I think that 3 years from now he'll be far from the highest paid. But I don't think he's going to be Manning or Brady or Breeze.
Do you think we'll be viewing him closer to Manning, Brady, or Breeze, or closer to Cutler, Romo, Schaub, Rivers in the course of the next 3 years?
He's got to be above Rivers. The best comparison
I know
is always Eli,
right now he's hang on. Right now he's between that.
Yeah.
Right now he's in the range of 5th to 8th. He's somewhere in that range. That you have the Bradys, the Rodgers, the Breeze, the Mannings, and then you have a group that includes Roethlisberger, Flacco,
And I think that's where
Matt Ryan.
I think that's where he remains. I think he's Roethlisberger. I think he's Eli. I think he's a guy that can step up and get it done when he wants to get it done. He's never going to be on your top 5 fantasy guy list. I think that Ryan remains a guy that your average fan is much more likely to gravitate toward as a star. I think he's well above Romo. But I mean, I don't think that we're going to look at this as a contract that hinders the Ravens financially. And I think that, he's got a legitimate shot now based on, the very low cap number this year to have a chance to come back and do something special. So, I think that 3 years from now, he'll probably have 2 more playoff appearances under his belt if I had to bet.
Okay, that's your takeaway. That's your bold prediction. And if you can say bold, it's all he's ever done is go to the playoffs.
Yeah.
The bold part is kind of saying that you're saying there's a year that he won't make the playoffs.
Well, he's overdue to miss, man. I mean, nobody goes all the time, so he's due to miss at some point. But, I don't think that Flacco's ever going to be a guy that folks are looking at and saying, I need him as my quarterback,
By the way, I'll agree with you that he misses the playoffs at some point in the next 3 years, but I'll also say that at some point, I think his numbers are going to consistently be better. And I think the part of that is going to be his own personal leverage that he carries now.
40 touchdowns?
I don't know that it'll be that, and certainly if it is, it won't be with regular. I don't think that'll be all 3 seasons that he looks like that, but I think it will be a little bit more than now. It might be more like 33 touchdowns.
Yeah. Well, I think his numbers go up. For one, the defense isn't what it used to be, and I don't think
that's part of it. But I also really do think it's part of it. Joe Flacco is going to be able to call shots a little bit more. Not that he's going to be the type that will always want to, and not to say that he hasn't tried to in the past, but I do think it's going to be a little bit more of, let me tell you what we're doing here. Let me tell you what play we're running now.
Maybe you saw that in the Super Bowl with that 3rd and 1 to Bolden.
I think that there's a good bit of evidence on that. I don't think that and again, I don't think that's the only time he's ever done it, and I don't think that ever came without the acknowledgement of they said something to each other and probably said something to someone else, to Hostler, for example. Joe Flacco and Anquan Bolden probably mentioned something to Hostler, and Hostler probably yelled up to Jim Caldwell, hey, Joe and Anquan saw this thing, and if they see it again, Anquan said, this is what we're doing here.
Well, and I would finish up by saying this, that a lot of what we attribute to Cameron, I'm not necessarily sure belongs exclusively on Cameron, and specifically the willingness to sit on narrow leads, I think, was a philosophy that was being adopted from the top down. I think that was the John Harbaugh philosophy as much as anything, and I think that the shakeup this year and whomever it is that imposed that shakeup, we'll continue to debate or guess about, but whomever it is that ultimately mandated that changes had to be made, I think that it sort of changed the way that Harbaugh did business in terms of his conservatism, and then I think that the absence of a prolific defense going forward also sort of makes you less conservative. I think they learned a lesson in that Washington game overall. I think that sitting on a lead like they did and watching that lead go away as they played conservative ball, Steelers game would come to mind in that regard as well. Like, they changed that philosophy at the end of the year, and I don't know that it all boils down to Cameron, but I think that's a page-turning moment. And so, the numbers should be there because with a 4-point lead now, they're going to let Flacco keep passing, and they weren't so willing to do that in the past.
I think that's going to change a lot.
I don't think that has a lot to do with his contract.
I think some of it does. And I'm saying not because – you don't do it because he has the contract. It's all sort of part and parcel. They know they've got their guy. That Joe Flacco, they've said they believe in this guy, and that's part of what comes with the contract, and that's part of – I don't know if they do some of the same things if they don't feel the same way about him. I think that's clear, that this is all accepting he's that guy. Part of accepting he's that guy is you give him a contract, and then once you've done that, once everybody's aware he's this guy, you sort of say to yourself, why is it that we're not trusting him in this situation a little bit more?
So under that scenario, you would expect that he'll have more multi-interception games going forward.
I would think so, yes.
He may have one of those 5-interception Matt Ryan games where he still wins.
Correct. Part of what comes with having bigger numbers or throwing the ball more is more interceptions. I just think that's the way that it's going to work. And at times that might hurt the Baltimore Ravens. At times it might be greatly beneficial. But he's the guy. Everything about the organization is now surrounding Joe Flacco. Everything about this organization. And I do also think that at some point in these 3 years, they have a tough decision to make with Ray Rice. It's not right now.
Yeah.
I think at some point before they have to retouch Joe Flacco's deal, they got to have the tough conversation in relation to Ray Rice.
I was gonna ask you off the top of your head, and I don't have time to go look for it. I'll have the answer tomorrow when we get together. But how many times in the 4 playoff games did the Ravens actually run the ball 25 times, or did Ray Rice get the mandated 25 touches? I would guess one at best.
Yeah, at best.
And maybe that was the Bronco game where they seemed contented to ride him in overtime so much.
It's obviously not now. It might be as early as a year from now, but at some point during this 3 years before they've got to look at Joe Flacco again, I think they got to look themselves in the eye and say, what are we really doing with Ray Rice? Like, what's the real game plan here? What are we trying to get out of it? It's not to say that it was the wrong decision to give him money. It's not to say that the Ravens aren't really glad they have Ray Rice on their team. They are. I just feel like that's the other prediction I'll make, that during this life of the Joe Flacco contract, at some point they'll have to huddle up in a room and say, yeah, we got to think about this whole Ray Rice thing. We got to figure out if this is really what's best for us, and if in any way it might be holding us back of other things that we want to accomplish. That's my other bold prediction. My next bold prediction is that you should go to Towson Place Liquors today to start stocking up. It is less than 2 weeks from now that we will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day, and you got parties, and you've got a parade coming up this weekend, and you've got whatever other shenanigans you're doing for St. Patrick's Day. Stock up, Towson Place Liquors in the Towson Place Shopping Center, just across from Walmart. 10% today, a 10% discount on all purchases of $20 or more for all WNST listeners at Towson Place Liquors and at their new location, Angels Cut Wine and Spirits in Ellicott City, 5725 Richards Valley Road. Same great ownership, same great deals. Towson Place Liquors and Angels Cut Wine and Spirits. Thyrl Nelson, I always appreciate an opportunity to chat with you. Did you happen to find the answer already?
I did.
Or? Go ahead.
It's 16, 30, 22, and 24. And, 24 against...
A little bit more than you realize.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, 24 against 25, but when you're faced with the big lead, 24 against San Fran is huge, and 30 against Denver in 2 overtimes, by the way. Essentially 1 overtime.
That was 30 for Ray Rice?
For Ray Rice. 30 carries.
30
all carries. No, they're all touch numbers. It's 15-1 against Indianapolis, 30-0 against Denver, 19-3 against New England.
Well, I do remember, obviously, in the Denver game where that's all you did.
First and second down through overtime, right?
Correct. No doubt.
And that's where that came from. But of course, Pierce had a bigger load in that. So maybe maybe it was unfair of me to say that they changed their philosophy that much in the playoffs.
All right. Interesting.
Pierce supplemented them.
Interesting. Get out of here.
As Joe Flacco gets to say today, and I say every day,